Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another retro review from past seasons of The Loud House. In today's video, we take a look at the Season 1 episode that technically counts as the very first holiday episode of the series, but it's the beginning point in which Luan's sanity comes into question. Today's episode is titled, April Fool's Rules. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. On the eve before April Fool's Day, the one day of the year where Luan goes off the deep end with pranks, the Louds try to protect themselves from being on the receiving end of the antics. But the next day, after failing to stop Luan from going through with her pranks, Lincoln, and eventually Clyde, willingly set off all of Luan's traps as a way to prevent Ronnie Ann from getting hurt by them by the time she comes over to the Loud House. The episode ends with Ronnie Ann, who Luan invited over as part of her master plan, nailing Lincoln's sister in the face with the pie she had intended for Lincoln, but the family getting covered in blue paint has Luan getting the last laugh. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. For a long time, I had no strong feelings one way or another about this episode, but then I slowly started to see why this episode got a lot of hate, and now I consider this one of the worst episodes of the series, and it definitely has not aged well. The episode established how April Fool's Day is the one day Luan takes her comedic antics and turns into a totally psychotic lunatic. The thing this episode fails to establish, along with her yearly prank-heavy tradition, is why she goes crazy on this day in the first place. I understand pranking her family is part of her character, but what is her reasoning for going insane with them on April 1st? What made her want to pull off excessive pranks and in the manner she chooses to do them? It's never made clear, and that's really disappointing in terms of defining her character's backstory. Either way, she whips her entire family into a paranoid state of mind every year, so I can see why they go out of their way to protect themselves before the big day. Why the parents can't put their proverbial foot down on what their daughter does is something I'll never understand. She also shows no sympathy to anyone, not even her family's friends, when she was asked to call off her pranks because company was coming over. She says anyone who steps foot on their property on April 1st is fair game, as Clyde once unfortunately found out. Not even Ronnie Ann was supposedly going to be spared from the pranks, which actually puts Luan in a bad light when you remember how she acted in regard to Lincoln's relationship with her back in the episode Heavy Metal. One of the many sisters who said Lincoln should kiss Ronnie Ann because of some underlying romantic feelings being floated between them is the same sister who was supposedly going to allow her brother's girlfriend to get hit with the same prank she intended to use on her family. Of course, Luan was never going to do that to Ronnie Ann, since she was the one who invited her over as part of her plan to trick Lincoln into leaving his boarded up bedroom and being forced to set off all the pranks in the house. Her plan would end with Lincoln not only looking like a complete mess in front of Ronnie Ann, but also adding insult to injury with a pie to the face courtesy of the person Lincoln was trying to protect. Luan sure loves taking satisfaction from other people's misery, doesn't she? Still, I have to give credit to Lincoln for being one of the two good characters to come out of this episode. He not only took one for the team by having his sisters use his bedroom as a hideout to spare them from the impending disasters waiting to happen, but he says he only set off the pranks so Ronnie Ann wouldn't get hit by them either. He did what he did for someone else's protection, so that was very courageous, admirable, a little stupid, but still very much appreciated. Ronnie Ann, the second best character of the episode, came to respect Lincoln's sacrifice, hence why she took the pie Luan had intended for her to use on Lincoln and smashed it in Luan's face instead. Considering the kind of bully-like character Ronnie Ann had been presented as since her debut earlier in the same season, it was very commendable that she was willingly giving up the perfect opportunity to nail Lincoln with a prank all because someone was looking out for her. Even Luan had to give props to Ronnie Ann for double-crossing her, so I guess that's something. Ronnie Ann and Lincoln were the two characters that saved this episode from being much worse, which, judging by the rest of the episode, isn't really saying too much. Although I did appreciate the Rolling Stones and Carlos Santana song references from Luna, as well as the James Bond reference by Luan, things could only get worse from there. The biggest problems to this episode are the moments that don't make any sense and part of the story being unresolved. First, there's a minor problem with the calendar, since when does the month of April have 28 days? Like, really, no one in the studio caught this before finalizing the animation? Then the kids worked together to lock Luan in a cage and keep her there until April 2nd, and that's when the biggest plot hole came in. There's no explanation as to how Luan not only broke out of the cage, but then being able to set up all her pranks around the house without none of them going off until Lincoln triggered them one by one. While I'm willing to buy into the idea that the rest of the family did their bathroom business and slept in their clothes the night before so as to avoid something happening first thing in the morning, it still doesn't explain how the main conflict was able to go ahead as planned if the character responsible for setting the conflict in motion was meant to be trapped in a cage and had no way to escape on her own. Who freed Luan? Who was her accomplice? Was it Ronnie Ann? I want to believe it was her, but there's no evidence to support the idea that she played a role in Luan's breakout. With no flashbacks and storyline exposition to show how Luan was able to carry out her plan when it was supposed to be impossible, the way the plot goes from point A to B comes off as extremely convoluted. It lends more credibility to the idea I've mentioned in my other reviews of the April Fool's Day episodes, being that they all take place in an alternative universe where nothing has to make a lick of sense. That theory can be supported during Lincoln's highlight reel of Luan's previous April Fool's Day pranks, where none of the characters appear any different in the past as they do in the present, on top of how Lisa should have been Lily's age and Lily shouldn't have been there at all. It is possible that all the highlights were from the year before this episode took place, so I guess that part of my fan theory can go either way. And finally, we never see what happened to Lenny after she duped herself into leaving Lincoln's bedroom to head to the kitchen for more supplies. Thanks a lot, Lana. She was just stupid enough to follow a bunch of arrows leading to what she thought would be her own kitchen, and yet we never find out where she ended up. I can't say Lenny's moments were all that bad, since her actions played right into the simple-minded character she is, but a little resolution and fallout to where she was going would have been nice. Instead, all we got was the rest of her family getting splattered with paint from inside the car as they were leaving to go find her. Not the ending I would have wanted, but given what this episode was about, I can't say it was unexpected. Overall, this is one of those episodes I tried to forget for a lot of reasons, and I'm sure other fans feel the same way. It's not one of Luan's best performances, and it does put her in a bad light for one day of the year. From a severe lack of backstory and exposition on how and why the antagonist is written the way they are, and how they were able to follow through on a plan that should have been impossible given the circumstances, the story comes off as one of those fanfiction episodes where nothing has to make sense in the slightest, and you're led to believe it's all non-canon. Throw in some flashbacks where characters apparently never age, and write a part of the story with no on-screen ending, and the final product just feels more disappointing than it needs to be. The only saving graces to this episode were Lincoln and Ronnie Ann, in which their individual actions were done for selfless reasons, and you could tell their friendship developed a little bit towards the end. Even so, they weren't enough to save this episode, and for a story from the classic Chris Savino era, it doesn't hold up the way you think it should. With that said, I give April Fool's Rules a 3.5 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of April Fool's Rules. This was one of the show's earliest reminders of how exposition can make a big difference in how an episode plays out. While this episode lacked important storyline details which resulted in a bad payoff, the April Fool's Day episode from season 2 had a much better payoff because it explained how the conflict was carried out nearly perfectly, so check out my review of Fool's Paradise for my complete thoughts on objectively the greatest episode that takes place on April 1st. But in the meantime, as far as this episode goes, what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.